Brace yourselves because a massive tax cut is back on the table, but it's tied to some of the deepest spending cuts that we've seen in decades. Trillions in tax breaks, cuts to health programs, and a late night Senate showdown, while President Trump's big, beautiful bill is already stirring up hope and fear for millions of Americans. Now, could your Social Security and healthcare be caught in the crossfire? So here's a hint: the stakes are really sky high. And here's the kicker: some changes that are buried in the fine print might shock you more than you think. So, is this bill truly a jackpot for your wallet or a ticking time bomb for your retirement? So, let's dive in and find out. Welcome to the Financial Freedom Network, the channel that exposes the truth behind your money, your credit, and your future. So, if you care about keeping more of your hard earned cash, boosting your credit score, and staying ahead of the financial curve, just smash that like button and subscribe right now because trust me, every video that we release could very well change the way that you live. Buckle up because this one's no exception. So, let's dive straight in. So Trump's new bill is all about tax cuts up front, and that includes keeping your taxes lower. The plan would extend the 2017 tax breaks that were set to expire, and that means income tax rates stay low, and some seniors could see extra relief on things like retirement income. In fact, the Senate's version even slips in an unexpected bonus: a new tax deduction up to $2,000 for almost everyone. Yes, even you if you don't itemize. Now, that could put a little more cash in your pocket every year, a plus, no doubt. But here's the twist: paying for those tax cuts means trimming money from elsewhere. Now, the bill doesn't magically make money. Congress had to find offsets. So, what is it that's on the chopping block? Well, a big target is Medicaid, the health program for low income and disabled Americans, which millions of seniors also rely on for nursing homes and long term care. Now, that's where things get very real for some older folks. Now, before we break down those cuts, I'm curious: how do you feel about big tax cuts if they come with cuts to programs like Medicaid? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you're finding it helpful so far, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update that could affect your finances. So, first things first, the headline everyone's seen is tax cuts. But to pay for them, the bill is slashing healthcare funding, and Medicaid is front and center. Now, on paper, the House's version already proposed stricter rules. For example, work requirements that would make certain adults work 80 hours a month in order to keep Medicaid. Now, many Republicans argue this encourages work and roots out waste. But in fact, they say these changes will focus resources on those who truly need care by cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, that sounds pretty reasonable, right? Well, here's a reality check: a lot of seniors could get caught in this crossfire. Now, why? Well, Medicaid isn't just for kids or unemployed folks. It's the primary payer for nearly 63% of nursing home residents in America. It also helps many seniors afford home aides and long term care that really Medicare doesn't fully cover. So, if the government tightens eligibility or adds complex work rules, even older people or their family caregivers, well, they might stumble on red tape and lose that vital assistance. Now, we've seen hints of this before. A few years back in Arkansas, a new Medicaid work rule led to thousands losing coverage just because they missed paperwork deadlines or got confused by a simple website. Now, imagine a 70-year-old being expected to report job hours online. It's just a headache waiting to happen. And sadly, it doesn't stop there. If seniors lose Medicaid help, guess who picks up the tab? Many could end up in emergency rooms without any insurance whatsoever. So hospitals would end up picking up the tab, especially small rural hospitals. They would have to eat those costs, and many of them are already hanging on by a thread. Rural communities rely heavily on Medicaid. Lots of rural residents are on it. So cuts hit their hospitals particularly hard. One hospital industry leader warned that rural hospitals would face difficult decisions about what services to cut if these Medicaid cuts deepen. Now, in short, some local hospitals might have to scale back or even shut their doors. And that's a scary thought if you live out in the country. Now, what about Social Security itself? Well, the good news is this bill doesn't directly cut Social Security benefits, so you won't see your checks reduced. However, something lurking in this bill could still impact anyone who uses Social Security services. So let's talk about that next. So, beyond taxes and healthcare, Trump's bill takes a swing at the federal workforce rules, basically how government jobs actually work. Now, it proposes an at will employment option, and that means new federal employees would have to choose between staying protected or giving up job security. And here's the kicker: if a new hire wants to keep the usual protections, so they can't be fired without cause, they'd have to pay more out of their paycheck into their retirement fund. About 10% more to be exact. Now, if they agree to be an at will and easier to fire employee, well, they'll pay a bit less extra, 5% more. So, in simple terms, the government is saying pay for a job security plan or else you're on your own. Now, supporters claim this will make government more efficient. They believe it'll be easier to remove poor performers and cut bureaucracy. But critics warn it could weaken services that seniors depend on. Now, think about it. If the staff at your local social security office are constantly worried about being fired overnight, well, morale goes down. Experienced employees might just quit instead of paying a job security fee. So, what's the result? Well, for you, it means longer wait times, more errors, and fewer knowledgeable people at SSA that can actually help you. Even the federal employees' unions call this a big retaliation bill. They feel it's punishment for civil servants and could let a president dismantle agencies at will. And that, of course, could include Social Security Administration or Medicaid offices, potentially leading to office closures or service cuts if budgets get squeezed further. Now, it's a side effect that won't show up in big headlines, but you could feel it when you're stuck on hold or driving an hour to the nearest Social Security office. So, at this point, let's take a quick breather. If this has been informative, go ahead and hit that like button because it helps more people find these important updates, and I really appreciate your support. Now, let's talk about what's happening right now in the Senate. Well, the House passed Trump's one big beautiful bill by a hair's breadth, 215 to 214 to be exact. But the Senate, well, that's a whole new ball game. Now, Republicans hold a slim majority there, and they're using a special process called budget reconciliation to try to pass this simple majority. That means every GOP senator's vote is critical, and not all of them agree on this actual bill. So we're basically watching a tug of war within the Republican Party itself. On one side, you have the deficit hawks. You've got senators like Ron Johnson, Rick Scott, Mike Lee, Rand Paul. They all hate this bill, and it still adds to the debt. They want even deeper spending cuts to offset those tax breaks. Now, on the other side, you've got the moderates and folks from rural states. They're really worried about the Medicaid cuts, rural hospitals, and also some of the clean energy program rollbacks. And guess what? The bill's not very popular outside of Congress either. Polls show about 23% of Americans support it, while 42% oppose it. By the way, the rest are unsure. So there's political pressure on those senators too. Now, this is where late tweaks can actually happen. We might see attempts to add that rural hospital fund we talked about, soften the Medicaid work requirements, or even reverse a particularly harsh cut. Now, one thing that's already on the chopping block is policy items that don't meet strict budget rules. The Parliament is doing a bird bath scrubbing out provisions that aren't mainly about the budget. In fact, an earlier draft tried to limit courts from blocking presidential orders nationwide, but that got tossed for not following reconciliation rules. So, after all the amendments and debates, the Senate will vote on its version. Now, they aim to get it all done by July the 4th, and that's a patriotic deadline, isn't it? But passing it in the Senate isn't the end. The House and Senate versions then have to be reconciled, made identical before it goes to the president's desk. And the House has its own ideas. Now, if the Senate changes too much, they'll have to hammer out a compromise. So that could drag this out weeks longer, meaning seniors and families will be stuck waiting to see what actually becomes law. Uncertainty is the last thing anyone budgeting for groceries and medications actually needs. So, with all this policy flying around, what does it mean for you sitting at home trying to pay bills and plan your retirement? Well, first and foremost, don't panic. Nothing changes overnight. These proposals still have to survive the Senate, the House yet again, and get signed by Trump. But it's definitely time to stay alert and plan ahead. So if you rely on Medicaid for any services or think you might in the near future, now is the time to double check your paperwork and your eligibility. Make sure addresses, income information, and work exemptions, if they're applicable, are up to date. Little details could save you big headaches if the rules tighten. Now, if you're unsure, talk to a trusted social worker or an elder law advisor in your community. They'll know your state's options. Some states might step in to help if federal rules change, but you might need to apply for waivers or state programs. Now, I know it's tempting to tune out Congress, but when they move fast on a huge bill like this, small details can slip through and have major impacts. So watch for updates from reliable sources. And if you see something in the news that doesn't make sense, ask questions. You can drop a question in the comments here because this community is great at helping each other understand these issues. Also, think about your local hospitals and clinics. If you live in a rural area or a small town, this budget battle isn't an abstract Washington thing, it's a kitchen table thing. Your nearest hospital might be weighing cuts or even closure if Medicaid funding drops. Communities might need to rally, fundraise, or even push state officials for help to keep the facilities open. Be aware of any town halls or meetings. Your voice can remind leaders that these aren't just numbers, they're lives and jobs on the line. Now, before we go, let me share a quick personal story. A few years ago, my uncle, he's 76 now, had a bad fall and suddenly needed round the clock care. Medicare covered his hospital stay, but it was Medicaid that paid for a home health aid, so he could recover at home instead of moving to a nursing facility. That aid helped him bathe, dress, and even saved him from another fall or two. Now, if the rules had changed back then, say if he had to prove eligibility under new paperwork or if funding was cut, he could have lost that help. My family might have been scrambling to pool money for a private nurse, or worse, we might have had to move him to a nursing home far away, somewhere unfamiliar. So these policies matter. They're not just political talking points, they touch real lives. Millions of families have similar stories where a program like Medicaid made all the difference in an emergency. Lastly, keep an eye on those final votes. The Senate's decisions will come out soon, and then we'll see the House's reaction. If this drags on, Congress might even risk missing deadlines, and they're racing against the clock. Now, uncertainty may continue for a bit, but knowledge is power. The more you know, the better you can plan. So, just before we wrap up, I want to ask you, what's the one thing you worry about most when you hear about a big bill like this? Is it the healthcare cuts, the deficit, something else entirely? Drop a comment down below, even just a word or two, because your insights help me understand what to cover next, and they help others realize they're not alone in this concern. So if this video helped you, just feel a little bit clearer about what's going on, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for tuning into the Financial Freedom Network, and I'll see you on the next one.